This is going to be a great panel. Come through, please do. We are going from talking about Bitcoin education to finding, finally, where Satoshi Nakamoto has been hiding for the past, 15 and a half years. The panelists this afternoon, you have Martti, who Finnish media used to ask him if he was Satoshi Nakamoto. You have Adam Back, who British media have asked him if he was Satoshi Nakamoto. You have Peter Todd, who Money Electric, the documentary by HBO, they asked him, or they suspected he was Satoshi Nakamoto. And finally, there's Luke DeWolf, who I suspect is Satoshi Nakamoto, just to keep the theme going. And Luke Dasher, who said, just don't mention anything. Okay, so first on the stage is Luke DeWolf, who is categorically not Satoshi Nakamoto. Come on down, Luke. Big round of applause for Luke, one of the event organizers. Wonderful. Next up, we have Adam Back, who is, of course, not Satoshi Nakamoto, CEO of Blockstream, Cryptographer, and one of the few people cited in Satoshi's white paper. On his left, we have Peter Todd, the Bitcoin core developer and security researcher known for his sharp mind and even sharper tweets. Come on down, Peter. Next to Peter, we have Martti Malmi. Martti Malmi is one of Bitcoin's earliest developers who worked directly with Satoshi and even handled the first ever BTC to fiat transaction. It wasn't pizza, it was his apartment. Come on down, Martti. Please give it up for Martti. And last but by no means least, we have Luke Dasher, the legendary Bitcoin core developer contributor since 2011 and staunch advocate for keeping the Bitcoin code base clean. Okay. Luke, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right, everyone. I think this is going to be a fun one. I just have to start like this, okay? I have to ask the question. I'm going to start with you, Adam. Are you Satoshi?
Absolutely not.
Peter?
I'm Craig Wright.
Martti?
No.
Luke?
If I was, would I tell you?
Best answer. Now, do any of you think Satoshi might be in this room? Probably not, right?
I mean, maybe the room's a lot bigger than we think it is.
We'll get to the physics lesson a little later, I think. So when we thought about this panel initially, we didn't want to call it Who is Satoshi? We did want to call it Who is Satoshi, but we thought that Where is Satoshi is actually a better question. And for that, I want to basically do a little bit of a history lesson. And this is going to be through the lens of what were your encounters with Satoshi, and why would somebody perhaps think you are Satoshi? So again, I'll start with you, Adam. Why were people thinking that you might be Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin?
I mean, they think a lot of people could be Satoshi, right? And I think the thought process seems to be, who was interested in electronic cash, who can program in C++, who was involved relatively early, and in my case, who's mentioned in the paper because he cited Hashcash. And of course, the other one is like, people are just trying to grasp at straws and assemble a story, right? So there's a bunch of stuff like who types with 2 spaces after every dot in a typing form, which is, to be clear, is like, probably most people of a certain age group in the UK and many other countries, but still. And the British spellings as well, that's another kind of factor. But, and another one, I mean, there's a whole like multi-hour YouTube video with all kinds of breadcrumbs of possibilities, but it just goes on, but none of it actually, and of course you can get some like coincidences, right?
Fair enough. I'll pass it over to Peter because I think you're the most recent, popularly dubbed Satoshi. So why do people claim that you might be Satoshi?
So for people in general, obviously it's because some director made an HBO documentary claiming I was. And then the logic of the HBO documentary, you can go say it's some evidence, may have replied to something, yada, yada. But I think the real logic is actually much simpler, which is I think Cullen was trying to go film. I mean, he did admit he was trying to go film 5-episode series on Bitcoin or whatever. I mean, that's a lot of film to go cover. That's like 5 hours of Bitcoin. Even we would get bored with that. And I'm sure after filming 3,000 hours of footage and trying to cut it down, he realized this actually sucks. And it's like, shit, now what am I going to do? I don't know. Why don't we just tack on trying to go find Satoshi? And the problem with that is you can't just go like point it at him back. Other people have already done it. I can't point to you because no one knows who you are, and that looks too ridiculous. Can't point to him because, well, he wasn't willing to go on camera. You can point to me, though, because I was willing to go on camera, and there was just enough little like dots that sort of vaguely worked. And the beautiful thing about media is there's nothing anyone can do if you just flat out lie.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. And I'll pass it over now to Martti. And I won't actually ask you why people might think you're Satoshi, but you had one of the earliest experiences basically with Satoshi and even like quite a lot of correspondence. So I think it's in fact quite silly for someone to claim you're Satoshi. So I'll actually ask this differently. What made you get in contact with Satoshi initially?
I just found the Bitcoin white paper. It was the only actually decentralized monetary alternative. I was big into freedom technology. That's why I did pretty good job concealing being Satoshi, you know, like cover story and everything. No one's ever like seriously suggested that I'm Satoshi, so being safe.
Okay. So maybe we have a reveal here. What are you saying, Martti? No? Okay, good. Well, and Luke, I think we haven't had too much of speculation about you being Satoshi necessarily, but you've also been there quite in the early days as well with the Bitcoin development. So, what was your earliest experiences with Bitcoin? What was that like?
It doesn't really have anything to do with Satoshi. It was simply a New Year's Eve party on IRC.
And what actually got you into it, though? I think that's maybe part of the history lesson here. How did you get involved with Bitcoin, and how did you get so involved with Bitcoin, becoming a core developer and all this?
And initially, I was into a kind of alternative number system called the tonal system, which is similar to hexadecimal. And so traditional currencies are generally decimal these days. And I saw Bitcoin as a possibility of having a tonal currency system with tonal units. But to do that, first thing I had to do was figure out what the base unit of Bitcoin was. And at the time, nobody could give me a straight answer, so I had to dig into the code and figure that out. And actually, I had to patch the code because it was rounding everything to 2 decimal places at the time.
And you fixed that, right? Something like that? Oh, there we go. Yeah. You can just do stuff like fix Bitcoin, apparently. Okay, so to bring this a little more into a relevance there, I think a reason why there's such an allure about Satoshi is that maybe if there was some understanding of who is the creator, then maybe we actually can find out something about the motivations. Maybe it even means that the whole thing is a total scam. Who knows? But I think one of the things that's time and time again is after Satoshi left, well, Satoshi basically handed off Bitcoin to the community, and since then there's been no central voice. So, Adam, what do you think has been the effect of Satoshi disappearing? Has it been a positive thing for the community since that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very convenient that there is no central figure, because the average person is kind of sort of trained by society to try and find out who's in charge of something, right? So if there's a company, who's the CEO? If it's a government, who's the president, prime minister, what have you? And so because Bitcoin doesn't have that, it makes it feel a lot more like a discovery or a fabric, like just something we can rely on the internet that is a thing of its own without anybody in charge of it. And of course, that does mean if there are any questions about evolving Bitcoin, about fixing a bug, about adding a feature, you get these kind of enormous drawn out discussions and arguments and debates. But that's just a symptom of something with nobody in charge. When you have things in charge like Apple Computer Corporation, you don't get to see any of their product design, and actually they are extremely secretive and controlling about, PR and messaging and about product prototypes and stuff. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's all out in the open. So you get to see, all of the design trade-offs and arguments about, a new feature. So I think ultimately, Satoshi leaving is actually turned out to be very good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that seems to be commonly held that there's no central figure. But what would it be like if Satoshi were still around? Pete, do you think that if Satoshi were still around, he would use his influence and direct the community in certain directions?
The thing is, the Satoshi we know clearly made a decision to go leave, to not use their influence. So if somehow they were discovered, I think the most logical thing that would happen there is they would either deny who they were, or if somehow you had incontrovertible evidence, they would, just not participate further. I mean, that would be the logical outcome. And I got to make the point that proving you are Satoshi is not easy. Certainly, like if I were in Satoshi's position with what we think Satoshi was thinking, I would have destroyed any ability for me to go prove who I was. And it's interesting that, contrary to popular belief, Satoshi did not create, a cypherpunk, if you will, style identity. All right, Satoshi put a PGP key on the Bitcoin.org website way back in the day. It seems to be deliberately a weak key with just 48-bit DSA, which, even back then it was not a good idea to use. And as far as we know, it's never been used. Like early releases of Bitcoin were not PGP signed. They were just put up on a website. And all of the communications we have from Satoshi, they're not PGP signed. They're just stuff on various websites. So ultimately, our understanding of what even Satoshi was, what they wrote, all comes through, ironically, trusted third parties.
So are you saying something like maybe Satoshi was never even individually one person? It could have been...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that whoever Satoshi was, they made a conscious choice to avoid creating an identity that was clearly Satoshi. Now, obviously, if you're going to continue writing on like Bitcoin Talk or whatever, you're going to end up sort of creating identity because people trust Bitcoin Talk to lie about this. But there's a philosophical thing here, which is one way to do this would have been to PGP sign everything and say, no, that's my identity. The other way is to just let that all slide.
Fair enough. And I think we're trending towards a little bit of that. The obscurity is pretty heavy here. Maybe to take it in a bit of another direction, what do you think would happen if Satoshi actually came back in some kind of a provable way? Martti, do you think that would ever happen and what that would look like?
I doubt that will ever happen. Seems like he's made a conscious choice, and even if he was outed, I think he might just be reclusive. I think it's good that we don't know who he is. It's so much better story, symbolically powerful, to not know who he actually is. Like, we're all Satoshi except that one guy.
Except that one guy, absolutely. No need for any further mention there. And Luke, so I think along this thread, so if Satoshi were to, if Satoshi never comes back, but we think Satoshi comes back, follow me here, say the Satoshi coins move, would that actually be enough for you to think that the entity moving them is Satoshi? Or what do you think? Do you think that will even ever happen, that the Satoshi coins move?
The only coins, they're not even valid coins, so they cannot move. We can speculate that maybe other Bitcoins are Satoshis, but we have no evidence of that. And there are other possible ways that old coins could move. A lot of them are insecure, and it's possible that at some point there's a cryptographic breakthrough that makes it possible to move those without having been the one that created them in the first place.
Okay, yeah. So maybe to translate that a little bit, it's pretty much that there's, even if those coins were to move, coins we think might be Satoshi, they also might not be. Is that something?
Even if Satoshi himself did move the coins, there would still be no way to link that to an actual person anyway.
I want to be really clear that there's this very common misconception that all of the early coins were Satoshis, and that's definitely not true. We, ironically, through the Craig Wright trial, we got in touch with a bunch of miners who had mined coins in very, very early days, and lots of them mined plenty of coins. Indeed, it is, is my personal belief, and I think this is strongly supported by evidence, that the first block after the Genesis block was probably not mined by Satoshi, because Bitcoin, as of the very first release, was actually quite clever in how it was designed in a way where anyone could just run a node, and they would be the first node, because it used IRC to help nodes find each other. So Satoshi did not need to run a node at the very beginning. Satoshi was able to wait for someone else to go do it. Similarly, like these claims of like, well, there's patterns and like Coinbase. It's like, look, we don't have copies of the early software people use because a lot of early stuff just got lost. We have no idea what software people are actually running. We don't know who decided to mine coins. We just don't know any of this stuff. And the simple reality is if early coins move, I think the markets will do the same thing, and at least the smarter investors will realize this is true. And price isn't going to change very much because there's no real risk of like everything moving at once. It's just not going to happen because it's very likely not one person.
Well, I mean, one simple evidence that there were lots of other miners is that I think, that you've got the halving schedule, so you would expect half of the coins, like 10.5 million, to be mined during the first 4 years, approximately. And so there would be about 2.5 Bitcoins mined in the first year. And so clearly, Satoshi would have been, 30, 40%. I'm not sure when the Satoshi pattern ends or if it just gets more obscure. But clearly there were lots of other miners, and he was mining a minority of the coins even in the first year.
Okay, yeah. So again, we have some unclarity about even who was mining the coins that we think are Satoshis. So maybe to bring this into a little bit more like practical, the history lesson of it all. What was it like developing in the era when Satoshi was around? Not even developing, but just being in the Bitcoin community when Satoshi was around. Luke, do you have comments there?
Not really. He was, I guess, still around when I got into Bitcoin, but I never had any reason to interact with him. I didn't know in advance that he was going to disappear, so I didn't make it a priority to interact with him in any way, and just never got around to it.
So interestingly enough, like he wasn't even like that much of an influence on the community after a certain point. Like development was happening on its own. It had attracted new developers who were doing their own contributions, something like that.
Yeah. A lot of it at that point was studying the code that he had written, but...
Okay, and Martti, a follow on to this. I know you talked about this a little bit in the trial for the guy we won't talk about, but how was it working with Satoshi?
I very much enjoyed it. He was a matter-of-fact guy, easy to work with, hardworking, industrious guy, considerate, polite, modest, unlike the other guy. Yeah, very positive experience for me.
And you generally were working quite close with Satoshi, right? Like throughout your time until you sort of exited from the community. It was around the same time even, right?
Yeah, I think until the spring of 2011 we did correspond.
Yeah. Okay. And then you took a little bit of a break, right, from the Bitcoin scene after that point.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Happy to be back.
Moved on to other things. Sorry, Peter. What are your thoughts about like kind of the early days? What was development like back then?
Keep in mind, I mean, I famously got a Bitcoin Talk account just prior to when Satoshi stopped using Bitcoin Talk. And I did have that one single interaction where, of course, I corrected Satoshi's technical mistake on what ultimately we would now call transaction replacement. And, clearly I just embarrassed Satoshi so much he just left. So, like, which seems typical for my usual experience now in Bitcoin. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that really set the stage. And as we all know, I did win that battle on RBF eventually. So
I definitely encourage you to come also to tomorrow's panelist looking at the future of Bitcoin. This is the history lesson, but you'll also be on the one looking at the future. And I know some of your ideas are interesting, to say the least. And Anna, what about you? What about kind of the experience of finding Bitcoin, and what got you interested in Bitcoin in the first place?
Well, I mean, I guess in a way Bitcoin found me because Satoshi emailed me, I think the first person he emailed. And this is before the white paper was published, before the source code was released. So it was in August 2008. And, of course, I was involved in previous attempts to create proof of work based electronic cash, and like people tried a bunch of stuff. This is going back to 1997, 1998 for some years, and so Waydai had proposed B-Money and Nick Szabo Bitgold, and those are kind of design outlines, but they've got gaps and they're not decentralized enough to implement. Otherwise, I think if people had found, a way to do it better, like Satoshi did, they would have tried to implement it. And Hal Finney did something else in 2004. And so, when I got his, his emails about, with the draft of the white paper and stuff, I understood enough to see that he had actually solved some of the problems that were holding back those previous proposals and implemented it. And so, I didn't, I figured, well, I understand the outline. So the big question is it going to bootstrap? Like, are people going to use it? So, there was a few emails exchanged. They're on the Copa website if you want to look at them. And because I kept them private, but when they were doing the Copa trial of the person we're not mentioning, they reached out to me and asked if I could share the emails, so in case they were useful. So I did, and so they're now public. But my question was like, is it going to bootstrap, right? Because there are lots of open source projects and like things that get started and they never reach mass adoption or become stable or in this case, have a price. And so, I just like, okay, that's cool. We solved the problem, but is anybody going to use it? And so I just kind of continued working on a startup and researching other stuff unrelated to Bitcoin. And I think by 2012, 2013, Bitcoin would come up in the news once in a while. Bitcoin went over $1. And at the time, that would be a market cap of probably about $10 million because there were 10 million coins. And then at some later point, it crossed $100. And it's like, that's $1 billion. So when it got to $1 billion, I was thinking, oh, that's real money. It's actually bootstrapping. So then I tried, I figured, okay, it's happening. So now I need to understand the detail. So I went and read what was available, and there wasn't much written. So then I figured there's got to be people maintaining it, like Luke and Pierre. So I found where they're hanging out, and then I asked them lots of questions. Initially, like with misconceptions, and then caught up a bit and start proposing ideas. So in a way, I was like, interacting with Satoshi early on, but by the time I went down the rabbit hole and got active, actually Satoshi had long left, I think, like by a couple of years, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting, but the story of how you kind of came into it and got convinced by it, I think is instructive, because I think many people have touch points with Bitcoin really early on. Not as early as you, Adam, or you, Martti, but people have touch points, and then it takes a while to kind of get in. But I think once you find the thing that convinces you, then you go all in, or at least many of us do. And actually, I think everyone basically answered that question already, except you, Pete. How did you really find and get convinced by Bitcoin?
Well, remember, I did try to go and invent it. And, Adam Back and I and Hal Finney and a bunch of other people, we were on this thing called the Blue Sky mailing list back in, the year 2000, I think? Or 2001, maybe?
Yeah, 2001, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. And it was interesting because, we're on this mailing list. We're basically trying to invent digital money. And what really struck me looking back at it was just how far we were. None of us were kind of on a path that was leading to Bitcoin. I forget who it was, might be Greg Maxwell or might be you, Adam, who pointed out that, I might have been one of the first people to write up this idea that, well, maybe money could be a series of things signing things, where you sign a transaction moving one thing to another. And all right, that's cool. Maybe I invented a tiny little bit of it. But I remember my own thoughts back when I was a teenager trying to invent this, and just how utterly wrong I was. And I was thinking, well, maybe inflation's the thing that matters. Maybe we got to control the money supply somehow. We'll use proof of work to issue coins. And of course, now I realize, no, it's that's exactly the opposite. It doesn't matter how you issue coins. What matters is how you preserve history. how you make changing history expensive. And somehow, even though it seems so simple now, I completely missed that. As far as I know, everyone else completely missed that. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if every single person on that mailing list did not go on to invent Bitcoin because we'd all been led astray by our just wrong ideas. And I'd also even go further and say, my suspicion is whoever Satoshi is, they were not that influenced by academia, because a lot of academic research on consensus systems was just in the wrong direction. Yeah. It was all about these things where you have a group of people and they come to consensus. And that taints how you think about consensus. Whereas Bitcoin, it wasn't so much about coming into consensus. It's about how do we make history expensive to change. It's not about who's in consensus. It's about how do we decide that something's history. So long story short is, of course, when I finally do see Bitcoin, it's not because like academic interest. It's really because, of course, I'm interested in freedom. Well, obviously, I need digital money. Someone sent me like a white paper, maybe in 2009 or something. I think I might end up on like Slashdot comment or something. And sure enough, when I read it, my honest thought was, fuck, I should have thought of that.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction actually, because similar kind of thought process, right? If you looked at B-Money and BitGold, and actually an aside, the Blue Sky list discussion Peter was talking about, you were what, 14, 15, something like that?
15 turning 16.
Yeah, and I was in my like early 30s, so we'd actually interacted on this like decades before we ever met in person in a Bitcoin context. And so for people who were trying to figure out how to make electronic money out of proof of work, it's when you see something and somebody's found an elegant solution, you're like, oh, that's clear. Why didn't we see it? Kind of thing, right? Because when you see something elegant in hindsight, I mean, it looks easy, it looks simple, it looks like you can understand it. But when you're starting from a blank sheet of paper, actually the search space is enormous. And I think the other thing about Bitcoin that maybe explains why why it was hard to design Bitcoin, like why nobody found it before, is that now that we do have it, I tried for 2013 or something like that for like some months to try and find a way to improve it. And Peter and I had a like 4-hour phone conversation about this at some point. And it seemed like anything you changed broke it or made it worse. And so it exists in this little teeny pocket in an infinite design space. So you've got to imagine if that's the case, it's going to be pretty hard to find this little pocket of design space somehow, some unique intuition or something.
And I want to make the point that I don't think Satoshi fully understood Bitcoin when it was created. Like this little pocket of design space, some of the stuff I think was just pure luck that it happened to be the way Bitcoin was designed. The scripting system actually is an example where the existence of soft forks is something that Satoshi clearly didn't really understand. Satoshi actually had an opcode, which was literally op version, and it was the version of code.
Instant fork.
Instant fork. It was a terrible idea. And I think it says something that Satoshi hadn't thought this stuff through, but left enough things in the design and got lucky enough times in the design that it's basically worked.
I think it's a bit naive to attribute it to luck. I think there may have been at least some trial and error before he did anything publicly.
Well, I mean, if Satoshi was talking to Adam back in like August, just before it was released, I suspect, my personal suspicion is Satoshi had a really hard deadline to release Bitcoin. Maybe like that's when, their sabbatical was finishing or something like that. And if that's true, it was probably a bit of a rush job, especially with stuff like scripting, which we know was added later.
It says there's a post on the Bitcoin Talk forum, Satoshi, saying that he decided that because of the nature of Bitcoin, it had to be frozen up for all time when it was first released, because you couldn't change it, because I probably hadn't thought about the soft fork. Yes. And also he says that he rushed the script system so that you wouldn't have to change it, so you could extend it using the script system. And then, if there were a bunch of bugs, that people later disabled half of it. But, it seemed like he was learning as he went, effectively.
Well, and I'll make a point, actually. There's an incredibly, at least in our world, a very, very famous design mistake that's even in the Bitcoin white paper, which is the Bitcoin white paper talks about the longest chain. And that is not correct. Version 1 of Bitcoin was the longest chain. and you actually need to do the most work chain for it to work properly. Which I think gets back to, yeah, it was kind of a rush job, and we're very lucky that it was able to be fixed enough to get to the point where we are now.
Yeah, anyway, and overall, I would say it is a very clever collection of insights that fits together neatly, and it's hard to find. And so he did, solve a bunch of problems that a lot of very smart people tried to find solutions for a decade, and he was the only guy that put it together. So, hats off to him. But he did make some kind of programming and design mistakes in there, which were fixable.
Fascinating discussion, guys. And so I think to end this off, I'll just ask the question of the title of the panel. Where is Satoshi? And Luke, I'll start with you. Where do you think Satoshi is right now?
I think he's made it perfectly clear he doesn't want to be found, and trying to find him would be a pretty strong form of disrespect.
Wow, okay then. Martti, how disrespectful do you want to be?
Well, I think it could also be like a group of people.
Fair enough. And where do you think that group of people might be? Peter?
I mean, if Satoshi's still around, probably on Earth. But really, this is a physics question. Like, what's the maximum acceleration a human body can withstand? Or if you think Satoshi's an idea, well, what's the speed of light and how far could the idea have progressed? And that's a pretty big sphere, I got to admit. It's like many light years in diameter.
It's the light cone since Bitcoin was launched, huh? Yeah.
Love it. Adam, any last remark here about where is Satoshi?
I don't know where Satoshi is. No idea. But I mean, the theories about spelling, I think, because it's written in a British or Commonwealth spelling, which includes many countries, but that could be written in that way intentionally. That's another theory. But I think the other thing that is harder to imitate, in my opinion, is some of the phrases. Like, the most toxic Satoshi quote, which is that he didn't have time to explain something to this guy that was asking silly questions. That I think people just misunderstand that because they think it sounds polite, but it's not for somebody who comes from the UK. So it seems like there's some British or Commonwealth aspect, but I have no idea.
All right, perfect. I think we'll wrap this up here. I hope this has been an informative history lesson, and there'll be more from everyone here tomorrow, a little bit more future-looking and what's going on currently in the space. So be sure to tune in for that, and thanks for coming to day one of BTCHEL.